prisoners were used as test subjects in a secret Russian facility. Kept in a sealed environment, with their oxygen levels closely monitored, they were exposed to a gas-based stimulant, designed to keep them from falling asleep. It was meant to last for 30 days. The only other means of observation were microphones and 5-inch thick glass windows for visual monitoring. They had books, running water with a toilet, cots, and enough food to last them for over a month. For the first 5 days things were fine. With the promise of freedom if they lasted a full 30 days, the subjects saw little reason to complain. One minor observation was that, as time went on, they began to talk about increasingly traumatic events in their past. By day 4 their conversations had dark and sinister aspects. After the 5 days, paranoia began to set in. As they complained about the nature of their capture, they suddenly stopped talking to one another, choosing instead to whisper to the windows and microphones. They seemed to think that if they could turn their fellow subjects in or incriminate them, that they would somehow gain the trust of the scientists behind the two-way mirrors. It was first thought that this was a side effect of the gas. It was on day 9 that the first of the 5 began to scream. For 3 straight hours he ran back and forth in the room, screaming incoherently. Even when his voice box was too torn and damaged to produce sound, the whispered squeaks from his throat made it clear that he still had not stopped. The strangest part was that the other subjects didn't even acknowledge the occurrence. They simply kept whispering into the microphones, until the second of the captives began to scream. Soon after, the remaining 3 took to ripping pages out of the books. They would smear them with their own feces and plaster them to the windows with calm indifference. The screaming immediately stopped, and so did the whispering. 3 days passed. Not so much as a sound from the room. It was as if all inside were dead, and yet all the test instruments suggested otherwise. On day 14, to get a reaction from the group, they used the intercom inside the room, which they had said they wouldn't do. They hoped for a response. "We're opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor. Non-compliance will result in death. Compliance will mean freedom for one of you." Only one responded, in a calm voice, "We no longer wish to be free." After a heated debate and failed attempts to further provoke the subjects, it was decided that they would open the chamber the next day. Day 15. Before opening the chamber, the gas was flushed from the room, replaced by fresh air. This caused an instant response, as 3 of them began to beg for the gas to be returned. It was as if someone had a gun to the heads of their loved ones. Their screams grew even louder as the soldiers opened the door, immediately mixed with the screams of the soldiers themselves as they saw what was inside. One of the subjects were murdered brutally. Chunks of his chest and thighs were shoved into the floor drain, leaving 4 inches of blood, water, and bile. The remaining subjects were in varying states of self-mutilation. Internal organs were strewn across the floor, intact and very much still working. Skin and muscle from their chests and bodies were stripped off, for consumption. They were eating themselves. Despite being special operatives, most soldiers refused to return to the room for removal. The ones that did had a surprisingly hard time removing the subjects from the room. One died when his throat was ripped out, another had his testicles bitten off. 5 of the soldiers later committed suicide. One of the subjects died almost immediately after his spleen was ruptured. Sedation was attempted, but after 10 human doses of morphine, he simply bled out, leaving a doctor with a broken arm and broken ribs. By the time he died, his vascular system was mostly empty air, and even after his heart stopped beating he continued to scream, "More." The last 3 were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The most severely injured of the 3 was the first to be worked on. Even with a 200-pound soldier on his wrist he nearly tore through a thick leather strap. They finally got the sedative to work on him, but the second his eyes closed his heart stopped and he died. The second was the first to scream. His voice box was torn beyond use, and his only means of objection were to shake his head violently. It was finally decided to perform surgery without the sedative, which left the subject docile. One surgeon noted that it was medically impossible for them to still be alive, and a nurse insisted that every time she looked at him, he began to smile. When it was over, the subject attempted to talk, and when given a pen and paper, simply wrote, "Keep cutting." Eventually they were all put back together as best as possible. After a heated argument, the head of the KGB insisted they be put back under, which the subjects continually requested. Once they realized they were going back in, they became docile. Restrained to their cots while the researchers prepared, it was clear they were struggling to stay awake. As they were hooked to EEG monitors, it was clear that their brain function kept flatlining. It was as if they were suffering repeated brain death. One notable factor was the fact that they were trying desperately to stay awake. One of the subjects, holding his head up above his pillow, suddenly his eyes closed and his head dropped, and he died. The only subject remaining who could still speak began screaming to be shut in now. It was clear his brain was doing the same thing, and he was close to falling asleep. The KGB agent ordered the room be immediately sealed with 3 of the researchers inside. One of the researchers drew his gun and shot the agent in the head. He then turned immediately to the mute subject and shot him in his exposed heart. He pointed his gun at the last subject, still restrained as the remaining staff fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you." He screamed at the subject. "What are you? I must know. How easily you forget. We are you. We are the madness lurking within you all, begging to be free at every moment in the animal portions of your brain. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject choked out, so, nearly, free.